roll when you're ready.
Yeah, let's assume that Larry will join as soon as his internet situation gets fixed. Okay. Well, good evening, folks. I'm going to call to order our regular board meeting on December 13th, 2020. And the first order of business is to roll call on attendance.
Good evening. Director Akush?
Here.
Director Sampson?
Here.
Director Smith?
Present.
Vice President Schmidt?
Present.
And for the record, President Russell is not yet here.
Okay. I need a motion to adopt the agenda.
So moved. So
I
moved.
need a second.
Second.
All right. Are there any public comments on the agenda?
Yes, there are two on the agenda. I just want to remind those speaking that you have 3 minutes to leave your comment. So currently I only have actually one, Mr. Phil Sauter. Go ahead, I give you permissions to speak, sir.
Thank you. My name's Phil Sauter and I live in Woodacre, just a mile walk from the edge of the district's watershed. As a 45-year customer, I'd like to welcome our new board members and thank you for your representation. I'm sure you know that Marin Water was chartered in 1912 and is California's first municipal water district. And I expect you're aware that the district's most valuable asset is its watershed, where an average of 52 inches of fresh, pure rain falls annually. I'm not sure if you've read the district's mission statement, but I wanted to quote just the opening of it. Our core mission is to provide fresh, high-quality drinking water at a reasonable price. Our local water supply means you can be sure your water is clean, fresh, and sustainably sourced. Water meets or exceeds all state and federal drinking water standards and costs you about a penny per gallon. We are proud to provide 100% locally sourced water to more than 191,000 customers in central and southern Marin County. About 75% of our water supply originates from rainfall on about 22,000 acres of our protected Mount Tamalpais watershed and in the grassy hills of West Marin, with the remaining supply coming from neighboring Sonoma County's Russian River water system. I hope you'll keep this core mission statement in mind over the coming months as we try to reconcile it with information that shows our average residential customer sprays about 40% of this pristine drinking water outdoors, and reconcile it with studies that suggest we may need to look at saltwater or brackish water as alternative water sources, and with the knowledge that some of us pay 5 times a penny a gallon because of fixed infrastructure and financing costs for large capital projects. It doesn't mean that any of these things are bad, but I think it does mean that it's worth recalling our roots from time to time. Thank you.
Thank you. Vice President Schmidt, you did call for items on the agenda, correct? Not public comment yet?
Correct.
Okay. So Mr. Clayton Smith, please, if this is regarding the items on the agenda, I'm going to unmute you, sir. Go ahead, sir.
Yes, I went online.
You've got mail.
Do you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
I hope I don't have mail. Anyways, I went online and I was looking here, and normally when I click on your meeting page, I get an agenda. What I got was an agenda packet, and instead of an agenda. And so I don't know really what the agenda is, because the agenda package is an 81-page document that's very, very small, and the way it's presented on my computer. So where is the agenda for tonight?
If I may answer that, it is the first 3 or 4 pages, always is the first few pages of the package, the beginning.
Well, let me look. I'm looking at it. If I'm seeing what other people are seeing, I'm not seeing. I'm seeing it says agenda, but I get the agenda packet, not the agenda. So
Well,
that's a problem for people who are logging on and want to know what's going on and in what sequence tonight.
oh, Mr. Smith, if you could call me offline, we can talk more about it, and I can definitely show you how to do this, how to navigate through the agenda packet, and just letting the public know that we are going into an agenda management system that will be a little bit more easier for the public. But until then, I will definitely help you. Just give me a call, and I'd be more than happy to help you.
Do you want me to call you on my phone? You're busy tonight, so this would not be appropriate for me to be dialing you now. So this would be at another time.
Yes, you definitely can call me tomorrow, or that would be great.
Okay, thank you much.
Thank you, sir.
Terry, do we happen to have his email address where we could email him a copy of the agenda?
I have to look and see. We have a lot of people that email us, so I have to look for it. The next speaker is Ed Jamison. If this is on the agenda item, sir.
Yeah, hi. You usually take comments at the beginning for items not on the agenda. Are you actually taking comments for the agenda as items?
No, we haven't got there quite. And
Sorry, yeah, I jumped out of order there. We want comments, public comments on the agenda first, and then we'll get to comments on items not on the agenda. Sorry about that confusion. That's on me.
I do have comments on the presentation by Jacobs. That's what I'd like to speak to. So is now the time to do that, or after their presentation?
which presentation are you talking about, Ed?
Well, I looked at the Jacobs slides. They're typical Jacobs slides. Are they
Okay.
presenting tonight?
I believe so, but
Ye-
they need
yes.
to do that during that session. After that
Right.
session, you can make those comments on that.
Okay,
These are all-
afterwards.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I have no further comments.
Okay.
I see one, Terry, no.
Oh, no, that's still Mr. Ed Jamison. He wants to speak for the
Oh,
Ed
got it.
Jamison group. So if you want, sir, I can go ahead and do the roll call or the vote for the adoption of the agenda.
Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you. Director Kush,
Yes.
Director Sampson,
Aye.
Vice President Schmidt,
Aye.
Director Smith,
Aye.
and President Russell.
Aye. Okay. So we now are at directors and general managers announcements. So Ben, you want to lead this off? And for you new guys, what this is a chance to talk to the public briefly about events that have occurred. For instance, if you attended a conference and in order to be reimbursed for attending a conference, you have to make a public announcement that you are at the conference. That's what this session is for. If there's something unusual, you've been selected by EPA to sit on some committee or something like that, that's what you fill in here. So Ben, you want to go ahead and start it and we'll see where it goes.
Yes. Thank you, President Russell. I do have a couple items I wanted to share tonight. The first one's brief. I just wanted to share with the board that we were notified that we will be receiving a grant of $6.5 million targeted for aging pipe infrastructure in Marin City and Canal District. And this really came out of so much kind of stakeholder and staff work and a very large collective to get to this point. So there's a whole lot of people that are to be congratulated, including folks in Marin City and Canal District that partnered with us to get this grant because we needed their partnership. So it's really a nice win-win and an opportunity to do some renewal targeted to those areas. The second item, I'll have a very brief presentation in a moment. What we've instituted recently is sharing our quarterly employee recognition awards at board meetings in this fashion to build on the recognition that these employees so deserve. So we have a quarterly employee recognition program that is peer nominated and awardees are peer selected with a committee 4 times a year, twice a year. In the winter and summer, we have big barbecues, all hands, and it's a very nice event. We invite the board to attend as well. We were hoping this year, but we did have a COVID surge, so we weren't able to do it in person. I do expect in the summer we'll have a great barbecue. So with that, I think, Terry, were you gonna pull up the presentation for me?
Mind if I make a quick comment on that?
Sure.
Hey, I just want to give a big shout out to that effort to help out Marin City. This has been a really important effort. And without a doubt, this goes way beyond the pipes that we're helping. Marin City, as you know, is a part of my division. The issues here go beyond that. This is years of support that community needs and deserves. And I'll do everything I can to continue to step up as the district is doing here. And a big shout out to Terry Green and Royce and so many others who are advocating for Golden Gate Village and the tremendous needs that community has. We'll do our best to support you, and this is just one step in the process.
I'm sorry, there's a little snag. Adrian, go ahead.
We might
Well,
need a moment
I can
to get
just
that
further-
PowerPoint.
I can do it without the presentation if that's better. Should I just roll with that?
Yes, please. Thank you.
Okay, so we have this quarter 14 employees that have been honored, recognized in 4 categories. The departments include customer service, human resources, operations, information, our IT group. These are just examples of, right, there were many more nominations and just a window into really the great day-to-day work that we do. So our first award winner is under the category Unsung Hero. From timely processing a mail to covering for support staff during vacations, Matt's demonstrated a strong commitment to teamwork in the past quarter and beyond. His friendly demeanor in customer service has made him a favorite among customers. And some customers actually request him by name and will wait until he's available so he can assist them. And the winner is Matt Reed, our customer service representative. Congratulations, Matt. Then we have the next category is Unsung Heroes, a team category, and that's Tiffany Freitas, Julie Munoz, and Vicky Garay in Human Resources. The nominator praised her professionalism and characterized her personal caring approach as something that can't be learned by any school or class. The human resource team drops everything to give staff their undivided attention and is eager to help all staff members. Congratulations, Tiffany, Julie, and Vicky. Well deserved. These are all well deserved. The next category is Innovator. In the past quarter, he created a digital log sheet to replace the department's antiquated paper log sheet, saving the team time and money in the process. His nominator said the new digital tool is customized exactly for our needs, and the big data storage and easy maintenance made it a big win for the department overall. And the winner is Alex Lamb, Distribution System Operator. Congratulations, Alex, and thank you for your work. The next category is Innovators, and it's a team award. Mike Snig, Pete Klanner, and Nick Viavani. They're maintenance workers. When working to bring the district Santa Venetia tank back into service after years of dormancy, they soon found the job was far from straightforward, but they were able to innovate on the spot, replacing the valve and control system while fine-tuning the system to maximize water quality and ensure proper water pressure for the nearby neighborhood. Congratulations, Mike, Pete, and Nick. Extraordinary service. On the short Thanksgiving week, some staff were long on problems. A time sync issue between computers in Corte Madera and our remote site led to big issues in our computer system. And it fell to this individual to coordinate with staff and a team of consultants to coordinate, to troubleshoot and coordinate a solution. Mariette Shin, one of our information system analysts. Congratulations, Mariette, and thank you. And the last award is Extraordinary Teamwork. if there was a water infrastructure emergency after hours at any point in the past 6 years, at least one of these 5 employees were on the scene. This team's incredible run of reliability, consistency, professionalism, and dedication, all outside their normal shift work and without standby pay, is a linchpin of a district that delivers for the customer. This award goes to Mark McCready, Jules Basserman, John Leska, Francisco Lopez, Ronnie Chaston. They're all utility system specialists. And this is, I mean, all of these awards, and I'm not picking favorites, but the crews that go out in the middle of the night, in the rain, in the trenches, and fix these leaks that are natural in a system like ours and, you know, can increase over time in an aging system.
You're muted, Ben.
I don't know what I did. Congratulations to, thank you, to all the award winners. And also thanks to the nominators, because without them, we wouldn't have the program, and to the staff that sits on the committee. That's all I have.
Thank you, Ben. And on behalf of the board, I'd like to congratulate all of the winners and for all their hard work and achievements. I'm not quite exactly sure how to do this because we haven't had you guys long enough to really have comments, but I'm going to call on you anyway. If you got something specific to something that you did this week that the public needs to know, then go ahead with it. Remember, the campaigns are over. This is not a place to stump speech. This is just bringing the public up to date on what you've been doing. So, well, let's start off with Monty, because he can give you an example if he has anything to say. I'm not sure. Monty?
Yeah, I don't have anything to add tonight.
Okay. Well, that's the appropriate answer when you don't, too. Okay. Director Kush?
Thank you, President Russell. Just reporting that I've been filling out various forms, attending training sessions, and doing my best to get up to speed.
Cool. Director Sampson?
President Russell, nothing from me this week. Thank you.
Thank you, Matt. Director Smith?
It's just been a pleasure meeting the staff and team. I think I'm up to about 35 plus folks. I'm impressed with every single one of them. Thrilled to be working with this group.
Thank you. And I have nothing other than my plane was late, which I apologize for, and not much I could do about. But that's why I was a little bumpy at the beginning. Thank you, Monty, for stepping in. Okay, so the next, hang on here. The next step is to get, I'm not sure, we haven't done the public comment not on the agenda, right?
Correct.
Yeah, so let's go ahead and do that.
Okay. Just reminding the public, you have 3 minutes to leave your comments. I have several right now. The first are Paul Mann and Phil Sauter. Go ahead, Mr. Mann.
Hey, good evening. This is Paul Mann from Water Champions. First of all, thanks for taking my call. And I wanted to extend a very warm welcome to our 3 newest board members. I'm super excited you bring collective experience in water science, fire prevention, and investment in emerging water technologies. You know, it's been wonderful that we just had this triple river storm for a 2nd year in a row, and it brought us a lot more time maybe to work on water strategy. But I hope that we're not going to become complacent. If you're a Game of Thrones fan, you'll understand what I mean when I say extreme drought is coming in a way that we've never experienced before. Science supports it, recent events display it, and even your own consultants at the last board of directors meeting showed you in their 100-year historical annual rainfall chart that rainfall is most certainly now on the decline. So it may come to a point where we need more supply, and it may unfortunately be through desal or a transbay pipe or dual piping recycled water. But if that's the case, we need to do everything in our power to reduce the demand side, because pulling that water through desal or from other locations have serious environmental consequences. We cannot use the same amount of water that we currently are using from these alternate sources that have such high consequences and impact on the environment. So if we're going to go that route, we need to be thinking ahead and figuring out ways to reduce demand and still take care of the land around us. So while looking at reducing demand, we don't want to forget that the land around us is deeply connected to that. So if we go through water restrictions again, then the land suffers around us and the risk of fire increases. But there are ways to reduce demand in a more ecologically friendly and sustainable way. This includes solutions that capture and reuse gray water, rainwater, and stormwater, as well as water efficiency devices, which can reduce potable water demand by 50% or more, a lot more. But we need more incentives, public education. We need comprehensive programs and installers that make these solutions a priority and easy to implement. So if you haven't already, I urge you to please read my letter that I provided to the Marin Water Board of Directors and staff last Monday, as well as the letters from Sustainable Marin, Sustainable Mill Valley, the Marin Interfaith Climate Action Committee, and many others that have been sent to you over the past week. There are some really great suggestions, real-world case studies, and even examples from Australia for what we can do to reduce water usage right away and create a more sustainable water future. Thank you, and wishing you all the greatest success in your efforts.
Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. I'd like to remind the board that the new members in particular, that we're not able to comment on comments made like Mr. Mann's because they're not agendized. So under the Brown Act, we just listen and take them to heart and move forward.
Thank you, President Russell. Mr. Phil Sauter, then Clayton Smith, please.
Yeah, I just wanted to jump in real quickly and confirm what you said, Terry. The agenda packet, the first 3 pages really are the agenda. And that's kind of what misled me to jump in. It's small, as Mr. Smith said. I just hit zoom, zoom, zoom. But the first item in there is items not on the agenda, and that's what led to my welcome comment. So I apologize for being out of order on what Director Schmidt asked for, and maybe being in order on what the agenda asked for. So yeah, the agenda is there. And thanks very much for putting it together.
Thank you,
and
Mr.
I apologize for speaking out of order if I did, but the welcome is heartfelt anyway.
Thank you, sir. The next speaker is Mr. Clayton Smith.
First off, I want to reflect for a moment on the remarkable changing of the guard in ultra-conservative Marin. It is the first time I think I have ever seen on any board, elected board of significance or city council, that there's been 3 people forming a majority of the board, actually winning all elections at the same time and having no incumbents returned to their previous positions. I hope this will be reflected in a restoration of open-mindedness to the board. That brings up a couple of issues to me. One of them is the recent episode of the big rainfall we suddenly had. And I want to reflect on how it was preceded by an extremely audacious amount of aerosol spraying, otherwise referred to as chemtrails, over the county of Marin just in the period prior. In fact, I actually took some pictures of it over my house, and it was so audacious, they were actually doing literal tic-tac-toe formations in the sky. I think it's time to find out what's going on. I'm almost think that they're almost chiding us to beg for information. I'm waiting for them to actually put circles and X's in the little boxes to give us a hint that this is not just nature. And I think it's important that we find out what they're doing, who's doing it, what are in these chemicals. They obviously are coming into our water supply. And I think that we need to do this for the health and welfare of the people here. And also whether or not This is a part of a larger geoengineering program that is altering the weather that we're living in, and that we're not really living in the kind of weather or natural weather systems that we were living in previously. Also, I've been working with a group called the Vaccine Safety Research Foundation, and their founder, Stephen Kirsch, who's the person who invented the optical mice that you all use on your computers, a very leading figure in Silicon Valley, who's the director of this, has also developed a very deep interest in the continued use of fluoride in our water system and its effect on mental capacity. He's very much into intelligence because he's extremely high IQ, that it's having a negative effect on people's cognitive abilities. And so I want us to have this as a part of the conversation moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Next speaker, Al Grumet, then Roger Roberts. Go ahead, Al.
Good evening. I wanted to extend a warm welcome to the new members of the board and thank everyone for their service on these critically important issues. I represent an organization called Sustainable Mill Valley. We have 270 members across Marin. We are focused on conservation and reuse as preferred solutions. And as you look at opportunities for water stewardship, I want to urge you today to think about how you can be rigorous in your approach to factoring true costs into your evaluation of each solution. There's certainly a tendency when looking at solutions to use just qualitative ratings on factors like pollution. But in fact, pollution has actual quantifiable costs. So you can use a cost, for example, of $200 per metric ton of carbon emitted to internalize the climate impact of solutions that you're considering. And there could be other environmental factors that also give rise to costs that can be quantified and internalized. And even if it's not a rigorous exercise, it will indicate where you might be underestimating spillover costs of certain solutions relative to others. And by the same token, there are spillover benefits associated with some solutions where homeowners take ownership of their own water use through reuse solutions like gray water and water catchment and swales and rain gardens. Those have spillover benefits to the rest of the community, and they allow for greater resilience in our water portfolio of solutions. And so we strongly encourage you to take a more expansive view of costs, both spillover costs and benefits when evaluating the portfolio. We also want to commend you on the work that's been done to date. We know it's a complex problem, and there's a lot of inputs and variability, and your openness to community input is much appreciated. So thanks for the work that you're doing, and we're looking forward to being part of this conversation as it continues to evolve.
Thank you. And Mr. Roger Roberts.
Yeah, Terry, this is for you, basically. When I pulled up the agenda this afternoon, the screen that came up was about 3 by 5 in size, and the print required a magnifying glass to read. I don't know why it came up that way when I pulled up the agenda, but I assume there's a fix for that. Thank you.
Thank you. Oh, there's one more speaker, Miss Marilyn Price. Go ahead, Miss Price.
Yeah, sorry, and I missed the first few minutes. Are we commenting on your item 7 now? Is that?
No. This is for items that are not on the agenda. So to comment on item 7, you have to wait for item 7 to be presented and then make a comment, please.
And that will be on your water assessment.
Yes, that's correct. Yep, we're sure to get you.
There are no further speakers.
Okay, great. Okay, so the next task that we need to go through is to approve the consent calendar. And Jared, I'm a little confused here. I was very surprised when I came in on Paradise tonight to see that the equipment was back. I'm not sure if we need to take item 4 off or if I can just ask for a comment on item 4. So I'll throw that in your court, Jared.
So a couple of things. I'd like to address a couple of the public comments, and then I'll answer your question really quickly.
Sure.
For members of the public who commented that they're having issues accessing the agenda, you can email board comments at marinwater.org, and we'll attempt to email you a copy of the agenda that's zoomed in, so you have access to that. Regarding your specific question, if the board desires, with just a simple motion and second, we can pull item number 4 into the regular calendar if we want to discuss that.
Jared,
that's up to the board.
Could we just provide clarification, or should that be pulled to do that?
If it's going to be brief comments and clarifications, we can leave it. If it's going to be a more extended discussion and people have, detailed questions, I would recommend pulling it.
Okay, why don't we pull it? I think it'll be brief, but I can't guarantee.
Okay. Well then, so Jared, the easiest way here is to pull it and have it discussed, or to do the rest of them and then pull it.
I would continue with the consent calendar adoption, removing item 4, and then we can move on to item number 4.
Okay, so Monty, maybe I could draw on you to make the motion to approve the consent calendar excluding item 4, which will be discussed.
Yeah, so I will make a motion to approve the consent calendar, removing item number 4.
And now we need a second.
Second.
Thank you. And now we need a roll call.
Director Kush.
Aye.
Director Sampson.
Aye.
Vice President Schmidt.
Aye.
Director Smith.
Aye.
And President Russell.
Aye. Okay, now we can have item 4.
Okay, perhaps I could give you some clarification on what's going on Paradise Drive. As you know, we had a emergency pipe break that took out part of the underneath the retaining wall and caused a sinkhole on Paradise Drive in one of the lanes of traffic. So we declared an emergency in order to get that buttoned up as fast as possible, since that's an emergency route for public safety. Also water supply. And so as we were finishing up the work on the retaining wall, we inspected the roadway further, and we found longitudinal cracks along the roadway for the entire length of the retaining wall, which is indicative of volumetric changes in the subgrade. So we think that the earth is still moving under there. And since cast iron has a much lower tensile strength than steel, we decided to go ahead and replace an entire 100 feet of the cast iron pipe along the retaining wall. That work has been done. Today, we pressure tested the new pipe and disinfected it. And with the next steps would be to get the BACT results and then tie that in to the existing cast iron pipe on either side of the retaining wall. And then we'll do some final paving. So we expect to be finished with the work by December 22nd. But because it is under an emergency contract, we are required to bring it back to the board to continue the emergency declaration until the work is complete.
And Crystal, I'm sorry. I just wanted to add one piece, kind of maybe for the newer board members. We have the ability, probably for obvious reasons, to for me to exceed my authority, my spending authority. Normally, it would go to the board.
Why don't you state what that is, Ben, so they know, because I'm sure they don't know.
Sure, it's $100,000. So when something is an emergency, something like this, we weren't sure necessarily what it was going to cost. We declared an emergency, got a contractor, and then we're required at the following board meeting to bring it to the board for the board to support that contract.
So that's already been done. And that's already been
done. And then this is the follow-on story to that, but just sharing.
Yeah, it's interesting, Crystal. I had noticed those cracks and I couldn't quite see that they were real from driving, but they looked funny to me. But I couldn't get enough of a fix on them to call it in. I almost did. I even took a picture of it. But but yeah, I'm glad you moved ahead on that, and thank you for doing it while I was gone.
You're welcome. Yeah, some of those cracks are a half an inch wide, so we did measure them.
Yeah, I guess they probably had gotten worse because when I saw them, like I said, it was hard. They appeared to be there, but it was hard to even see that they had separated yet. They'd separated vertically, but I don't think they'd separated horizontally. Okay, so guys, this one you can ask questions on if you have any questions. I'm not sure. Okay,
Okay.
hearing that. Oh, go ahead.
No, I'm good.
Okay, hearing none. I need a motion to approve this. And as you can see on the agenda, we need a 4 out of 5 member vote positive on it. I need a motion and a second.
So move.
Second.
Okay, now we need a roll call.
Director Kush,
Aye.
Director Sampson,
Aye.
Vice President Schmidt,
Aye.
Director Smith,
Aye.
and Director Russell.
Aye. Okay, now we're ready for the real action here. Okay, let's move on to item 5. A resolution updating the fine schedule for fire-related offenses on district watershed.
Yeah, good evening, board member. Sean Horn, Watershed Resources Manager. I'm here with Don Wick, our Chief Ranger. So this item is updating our fire-related offenses on the watershed. We've identified 3 of them at the request of the board to review fire-related offenses. This is really out of an interest to protect the watershed and try to reduce the potential for human ignitions on the watershed, and in part responding to a small wildfire we did have on the watershed that was a result of smoking. So at the November 18th Operations Committee, we brought this item to the Operations Committee to review and discussed updating 3 fines. Those fines relate to smoking on the watershed, fireworks, and fires. So in 2017, the board adopted the county's bail schedule for all of our fines. And tonight we're looking at modifying those to increase the fees for those violations. We did create a 2-tiered structure. So if you look at table 2, which is our proposed bail schedule for smoking, which would increase each offense. And then we elevated the fines for fires and fireworks. And when we say fires, this is meaning kind of a small campfire that someone may choose to build for whatever reason, not like an arson event, which would be a felony and handled differently. So each year the district gets an opportunity to update these fines. This is a fairly strategic and pointed update to these fines that we've got here, and we've increased them significantly with respect to the penalties and court fees that come along with that. So the base fine is added on with those other fines, and then we've provided you with the totals of what those new fines will be for violations. So with that, we're asking the board to adopt a resolution tonight, and we'll update the fines. And then I'll just note that as part of our watershed recreation management planning process, we'll be reviewing more holistically all of the fines and fees that we have on the watershed. So with that, Don and I will take any questions that you might have.
Thank you, Sean. So guys, this is sort of a free-for-all. You can ask questions as you wish. There's no, I'm not going to call on you. You just interrupt and go forward and work it out. So if you have any questions, this was presented at the doc meeting last Friday or 2 weeks ago, last month, I guess it was. So it has been discussed in the public, but like I say, go ahead and ask whatever questions you may have, if any.
Sean and Don, if I could start off. First, thank you very much for putting this together. These are obviously big things that we want to deter the public from, and this definitely does that. So I'm very supportive of it. Out of curiosity, about how many citations are we giving for smoking annually, roughly, if there's a rough number on that?
Well, we respond to a lot of calls about smoking, but it's an on-view offense. By the time we get there, we really don't see them smoking. So there's the amount of fines we got are about nil.
Okay.
We have cited a couple of people for having illegal fires. In the last, I don't know, 2 to 3 years, there's been several of those.
Great, thank you. And that was it. Thanks.
Yeah, and
Thanks,
I'll just
Thanks,
note
Don.
that once a month, the Rangers give an update, and in that update that goes as part of the GM report, we do identify the different fines that have been given out to folks on the watershed.
So that's a table in the general manager's report that you can see. Any other questions?
Given that we don't often, or maybe not in a while, have given out a fine for this, I'm wondering to what extent, and I know we have lots of signs in our watershed. I'm not a fan of posting lots and lots more signs, but when you see like the carpool lane, you see the toll that goes with driving in the carpool lane illegally. I think that has a deterrent factor. So I'm wondering whether maybe the thing might be to do, if there's a good place to do it, would be to have a sign that does state the fine associated with smoking, because that actually might do more to deter the problem than the fine itself.
Yeah, thanks, Director Schmidt. We do have kind of A-frame signs that we put around areas where we've had problems in the past, and so we can definitely, at the next update of those signs, put the fines on there. We do now kind of identify the regulations, so it wouldn't be a problem for us to add that.
Okay.
Sean, I understand that the fines are being raised in accordance with the previous board recommendation, and that makes sense. I'm just curious how the smoking fines compare with other fines on the watershed, for example, off-leash dogs and biking on trails.
Don, you want to take that one?
Sure. Well, all those are pretty much in line with each other. We're trying to raise this one up because we're trying to act as more of a deterrent by increasing the fine. And Director Schmidt, I think you have an excellent idea. Maybe posting the fine associated with the offense would be a great way to educate the public also. But like we said, in 2017, we adopted the bail schedule that the county had and drew ourselves kind of in line with it. Now we're trying to separate a little bit with these particular offenses, just to increase them a little bit.
Thanks, John. Any other questions?
Larry, I'm good. I've seen the presentation and questions before. I think posting signs like this is important. I would encourage us to have a lot of positive messages on our signs as well. There's a lot of no's up there, so maybe we can review things as a whole as opposed to just this one item to put on there.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments? Any public comments?
There are none.
Okay, so I need.
Oh, I'm sorry. Someone just raised his hand. Is that okay?
Of course.
Okay, Mr. Clayton Smith, please.
This is an interesting topic to me because I live right above Rhubarb Path, which runs out from Oakwood Valley to the parking lot at the stables on Tennessee Valley Road. And in my frequent walking on that path, there's a lot of cigarette butts. That's not an unfamiliar thing, but also once upon a time, we actually had a homeless person set up camp up off the path. And that was an issue which disturbed the neighbors. We had to have it removed. And then we also had, interesting enough, an arson that attempted to start a fire along the path that ended up with an afternoon of aerial bombardment of the area with desiccants of some sort, fire retardants. And so I realized these paths are actually an unpoliced and potentially high liability area. And also we have had bicycles that have been on the path that have been damaging the path, which is in a very fragile terrain. And there's I've never seen any sign that tells about the fines that might be available, either for smoking or biking. And also, since everyone's carrying a camera around with them, it might be something to let people know that a camera or video evidence of someone riding a bicycle in an inappropriate place or smoking on the path would be evidence enough, at least because I know you guys end up handing out fines. I got up on Bolinas Ridge, you guys nailed me for almost a $200 parking fine for being up there 10 minutes after sunset. It really pissed me off. So if I have to share that kind of pain, these other people should be instructed that there can be pain for them also. That's my thoughts.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. I have two more speakers, Larry Minikes and SO. Go ahead, Mr. Minikes.
Good evening, and briefly, there are many types of signage that you'll find on the watershed. And what I would suggest is considering a signage master plan and really putting a lot into it. It's a way to educate the community. And with that, thank you.
Thank you, sir. And the next speaker is SO.
Hi, I was just calling in to reply to the comment ahead of me just now, equating to riding a bicycle on a trail in line with starting a fire or smoking on the watershed. It's slightly absurd. You know, we had a huge incident that we got very lucky with on July 3rd of this year, where a hiker was smoking near Lake Lagunitas and started a fire that thankfully we were able to put out. I'm all for enhancing and updating the schedule of fines for smoking, fireworks, fires, whatever on the watershed. But as far as I know, that hiker was never cited and never fined. And I know plenty of mountain bikers and other, trail users that have been cited on the watershed and have been fined hefty fines. So if we're going to enforce the rules, let's try and do it for everyone. And also let's not equate trail usage to literal arson. It seems a little bit extreme, and that's all I have to say.
Thank you, sir. There are no further speakers.
Thank you. Okay, now we need a motion.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you, and a roll call.
Director Kush,
Yes.
Director Sampson,
Aye.
Vice President Schmidt,
Aye.
Director Smith,
Aye.
and President Russell.
Aye. And you might notice that the order of the roll call, it will change with each meeting. The reason for that is to avoid by alphabetical order always being called in the same order to vote, so that you don't have to feel you're like going to be first. That's why we rotate those around. The only position that doesn't move is the president, which is the last vote. Okay, thank you all. Item 6, water supply assessment for proposed Northgate Town Square development.
Good evening, directors. Crystal Yesman, Director of Engineering. Tonight, we are presenting the water supply assessment for the Northgate Town Square redevelopment project for your consideration. And we have with us Alicia Irish, the engineering manager for our planning department. Alicia?
Good evening, directors. Today I'm going to present an item that was previously presented at the November 18th Operations Committee regarding the water supply assessment for the Northgate Town Square redevelopment project. In January 2022, the city of San Rafael, as the lead agency under CEQA, held a scoping meeting in connection with its environmental impact report for the proposed redevelopment of the Northgate Shopping Center. This proposed project, the Northgate Town Square redevelopment project, will create over 1,400 residential units with a variety of mixed-use spaces in a two-phased approach, with phase 1 being completed in 2025 and full build-out in 2020. A project of this magnitude triggers California Water Code requirements for the Supplying Water Authority to produce a water supply assessment to evaluate water supply and demand projections. This water supply assessment evaluated both potable and recycled water demands for both phases of the proposed project. Based on currently available information and conservative estimates on projected demand, the district expects to be able to meet all future demands within its existing service area, inclusive of the proposed project for normal, dry, and multiple dry hydrologic years. The shortfalls that are currently projected during an extreme drought scenario would not be materially different than would be experienced without the proposed project and would be addressed through planned implementation of the district's water shortage contingency plan. In addition, the district is also preparing a strategic water supply assessment that will identify ways in which its water supply portfolio can be augmented to serve all users, including the proposed project, in such an extreme drought scenario. Staff is requesting the board to approve the Northgate Town Square redevelopment water supply assessment to allow the CEQA process to progress.
Thank you, Alicia. Just like to remind the board that it is not the job of the water department to do land use planning. That is a function of the county. Our job is to find the water and provide it. So just a heads up on where our responsibilities lie. With that, any comments from the board? Okay, hearing none. Public comment?
Yes, we have a couple of speakers, Clayton Smith and Roger Roberts. Mr. Clayton Smith, please.
Well, this subject brings up the issue of the housing element, both the housing element that the county is facing and the 11 cities and towns that are in Marin County, many of whom I think of the majority who draw their water from the Marin Municipal Water District. And I find it kind of interesting that we have all this development that's being proposed in a kind of amorphous and yet to be completely and well-described manner and whatnot. But there has been no assessment as to what she just referred to. We have not had any concrete assessment delivered at any of the meetings. I've been going to, I don't know how many meetings and how many hours of meetings. One that on Monday lasted until 11 o'clock at night. Never is this issue of water addressed. And yet when I was up in Marinwood in an occupational therapist's office, when the issue of housing came up, his assumption was because we didn't have the water, there would be no housing. And this is an assumption commonly held by the people of Marin County. And yet I think it's an erroneous assumption. We're going to end up with housing and no water or not enough additional water to mitigate the need to squeeze the existing consumers in terms of their ability to access supply. And so just saying it's not the responsibility of the board to involve themselves in land use planning, but at the same time, the absence of the board in this planning process, I think, is deleterious to the best interest of the people of this county. And I think the people of this county are actually counting on you, as they have in the past, to act as a bulwark against irrational planning. And if you're not going to deliver on that, I'm going to tell you, particularly the three new guys on this board, this is going to be held. You're going to end up being held to account for this, if not in any legal or other kind of way, perhaps politically. The reputation of this board is very much founded on the fact of its control over indirectly what goes down in this county, because it has the possession of these waters. And I want you to think about that. Thank you.
Mr. Smith, what I said was it's the water district's responsibility, not the board's responsibility. It's not the board that is in the position to make any of these decisions. It's the water district. And Ben, could you speak to that for a moment?
Yeah, I would. Thank you. The state housing numbers, the RHNA numbers, have been incorporated into our strategic water supply assessment, item 6 or 7 tonight. The next item that we'll be discussing, and we've been sharing that with the board and public, that those numbers are incorporated in the the quantity of water that's been identified that we need for supplemental water does incorporate those numbers. The process for us that we're following appropriately is once the jurisdictions update their housing plans, which is now underway, the district will then, and this is probably the next month or two, we'll be taking a look and beginning to update our urban water management plan that was developed before the state numbers were put in. And we'll take a look at that. I suspect because the numbers have been incorporated into the strategic water supply assessment, that's going to be a key part of the mix. But that's the process that we go through. Once we have adopted numbers, then we update our plans and the process works.
Thank you, Ben. Any other public comment?
Yeah, there are two. Mr. Roger Roberts and 8800. Mr. Roberts, please.
Yes, I assume you can hear me.
Yes, sir.
Loud and clear.
When you were doing the analysis of the impacts of the project, providing additional 1,700 residential occupants, were you using the analysis provided in the urban water management plan as your basis for determining the ability to meet that demand, or were you using some other analytical base? Because the urban water management plan falls far short of dealing with our current situation of potential drought and water shortage. It calls for a historic look rather than a forward look. So it makes a difference when you do the analysis, whether you're looking forward based upon current expectations of climate change and relying upon historic analysis, which is faulty under the current circumstances. So which did you use? Because if you were using the analysis associated with the urban water management plan, I submit that that is not a very good basis for coming to the conclusions that you have had to make. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Would you
Mr.
like
Roberts.
to address that, Alicia?
Yes, I can, Director Russell. We did use the analysis consistent with the urban water management plan, and you are correct that the urban water management plan does take an historic look at normal dry and multiple dry year hydrologic scenarios. However, Water Code section allows for urban water management plans to consider plausible changes in projected supplies under climate change conditions. Our 2020 urban water management plan included such a scenario, the extreme drought scenario, which was also evaluated as part of this water supply assessment.
Thank you.
And the last speaker is 8800. Go ahead.
Hi, Nancy Okada. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. The board is in charge of hiring and firing the staff or the management of the staff. So the board is actually responsible for what the staff comes up with and needing to accurately ask questions to find out. This situation means that the public really needs to know how you're going to squeeze more water out of the existing water supply, how you're going to put more straws in the drink, and how everybody is going to be conserving even more to allow for all this water to be allocated. I see you finally did put the new housing hookups in the board packet. They're increasing every year, but the public needs to know about this because we are being asked to not only pay more for water, but also to conserve more water. And I think that the public really needs to have you take a stand that we cannot continue to squeeze more water out of our people. I mean, making the golf courses dry and taking away swimming pools and all those luxury items, okay, as well as not watering our lawns, getting rid of lawns and becoming a desert. But the thing is that you are responsible for approving this use continued hookups, and this is just not fitting into our environmental situation. So please deny this project. Thank you.
And to the public, please recall that this is a dual plumbed process. The project is, the toilets are flushed with reclaimed water, and any irrigation they do would be done with reclaimed water. So it's a unique situation that occurs because of its location.
And President Russell, may I add just a word? Tonight's action here is actually just complying with the California Water Code requirements. Essentially, what the district is doing here is it has what's called an urban water management plan, which looks at all the demand. This project wasn't included in there, and it's of the size that triggers the water code provisions that require the district to create this supplemental report if requested by the city. The city of San Rafael has done that here. Tonight, the board is not approving this project. It's not approving even a water hookup to this project. This report will actually go, if approved tonight, to the city of San Rafael and be included in an environmental impact report that will look in. Actually, the city makes the conclusion whether or not sufficient water is available based upon this report. So just for clarity, this is compliance with the California Water Code.
Which is the law.
That's helpful, thank you.
Any other public comments?
There are none.
Okay. With that, I need a motion to approve the report.
So moved.
So moved.
And it,
Second.
okay, that works. Thank you. Roll call.
Director Kush,
Yes.
Director Sampson,
Aye.
Vice President Schmidt,
Aye.
Director Smith,
Aye.
and President Russell.
Aye. Thank you. And thank you for the public comment. Okay, item 7, water management portfolios for the strategic water supply assessment.
Good evening, Paul Sellier, Water Resources Director. Before we get going on this item tonight, I'd just like to address a couple questions that have come up, in particular around conservation and how we've included that in the strategic water supply assessment. We've included conservation as a water management alternative. And you'll see this evening, it's in there with all the other projects for the board to select as if it were a project. The conservation element that's included in the strategic water supply assessment is it's a slice, if you like, or a subset of a much larger conservation plan that the district pursues. And the subset is because we need a high level of reliability. For every gallon that we're going to save through conservation, we're going to reduce the water supply deficit. And so we understand that there's some sensitivity over how conservative this may be. And to ensure that we weren't overly conservative, we brought in a team of not just one, but 2 third-party reviewers who are both national experts in their fields. Peter Mayer, who reviewed the conservation plan and found that our approach to developing the plan was good and it was achievable and reasonable. More recently, Madaus Water Management, also national experts in the field of water conservation, reviewed the plan. And while they provided a number of very interesting comments around water loss, which we do intend to follow up on, ultimately, they ended up recommending a slight reduction in the total volume of conservation that we had included. And we're not going to take that. It's a very small adjustment and probably not worth making that adjustment at this point. So we feel confident that we've done a reasonable job including conservation as a water supply in this project. And as you'll see tonight, as I mentioned earlier, it's included as a project selectable by the board in the portfolios. We look forward in the coming months to share with the board more details about the full conservation plan, and we're working on updating our conservation master plan, which we'll be sharing with you. Tonight, though, we have Armin Munivar and Marcelo Reginato, which I got to say is a great name. And I love saying that. It just has a good ring to it. So welcome to our Jacobs Engineering team, who'll be taking us through the presentation this evening.
Before we do that, Paul, could you do a little more of an update on where we are in the process and introduce Armin a little more so that the new board members know who he is and what Jacobs is doing for us and when it's expected to be completed and so forth?
Yeah, so in the background, we've been trying to get our new board members up to speed, and we've met with all of them individually to walk through a fire hose version of everything we've been doing since March of this year. So we've tried to sort of synthesize that down. We essentially looked at different hydrologies. And Armin will be reviewing some of this very lightly tonight in terms of where we are in the process. But at this point, we've identified a number of water management alternatives, and we're attempting to consider how we move forward from looking at them as individual projects and combining them into what we call portfolios and strategies.
Thank you. And could you introduce Armin?
Yes, and we have Armin Munivar with our Jacobs Engineering team.
Yeah, well, good evening. Thank you, Paul. Thanks, President Russell. We prepared a brief update of the strategic water supply assessment for the board, and within this presentation, there's some background material to help the new members of the board kind of get up to speed, with the focus on the latter portion of the presentation, where as we move into strategies and portfolios. So as I mentioned, my name is Armin Munivar. I'm with Jacobs, and I'm the project manager with Jacobs for this strategic water supply assessment. And Marcelo Reginato is also on the line here. So we've been at this for a number of months now, looking at a range of water supply conditions, climate projections, potential scenarios, and focused on looking at water management alternatives. And now we're moving into kind of how we might look at combinations of some of those alternatives to address the water supply or deficits that might be forthcoming. So
let me interrupt you a second, Armin.
Sure.
To the fellow board members, you can feel free to ask questions when you are ready to ask a question, or you can wait until the end and ask your questions then. So it's a fluid relationship here, and Armin is quite quick on his feet, so he will be able to answer your questions almost assuredly.
Yeah, great. Thank you. Happy to take them at any time. So what we intend to present today is project updates, so just a little bit of where we've been and where we're at within the strategic water supply assessment. But then, as I mentioned, really a focus on the strategies and portfolios and the next steps in the process. We are here today to talk about those strategies and portfolios. Moving forward into the first part of January, there will be an analysis of those portfolios. And then using the results of those portfolios, there will be a crafting and a preparation of a recommended roadmap for the board to consider. And that will be happening in late January, early February. Just a little background for the newer board members, and I apologize for the returning board members who've seen this multiple times, but this was our process, or is our process, for conducting the strategic water supply assessment. We've spent some effort looking at strategy and goal kind of overall. There's been a decision support model or a system operations model that has been developed to help understand how various hydrologic conditions affect the system operation, and then how various alternatives might improve the resiliency. We've looked at water supply and demand scenarios and have crafted those to kind of frame the problem, recognizing that we don't know exactly what the future how it's going to play out, but we have scenarios that attempt to grasp some portions of that future. Then we spent a lot of time developing water supply alternatives or water management alternatives, more accurately described. And we've done some evaluation of those water management alternatives. So we're at kind of this point where the arrow is showing is this point in the process where we're taking those water management alternatives and looking to craft various portfolios or strategies and portfolios to assess how they perform in resolving deficits that might come about. And then in the January, early February timeframe, there will be a preparation of a recommended roadmap for the board to consider. Just graphically looking at our process, we've been looking at various water management alternatives, managing demand on the conservation side. We've been looking at supply, new supplies, better operations or improved operations. And we're looking, and then we evaluated all of those for a range of criteria: cost, timing, environmental, social criteria. And now we're in the process of crafting portfolios where we're looking to explore strategic combinations of various alternatives. And those will inform the eventual development of the roadmap. Just looking at the scenarios, we've crafted a set of scenarios, primarily looking at hydrologic and climate conditions in the future. So we like this cone of uncertainty that's graphically shown on the right to display that all we really have known is kind of the rear view mirror concept of what's climate and hydrology has given us. So we have over 100 years of historical rainfall and flow records. We have projections of the future through climate models, and we have some uncertainty even with respect to those climate projections and what the future might, how the future might play out. So what we use the scenarios for is to craft kind of plausible futures to allow us to test the robustness of Marin's system in delivering the water supply needs of the future. We've looked at historical droughts. We've looked at future climate projections. We've done some initial evaluation of paleo reconstructions, primarily on the North Coast and the Russian River. And then we've developed a set of a stress test scenario as well that looks at even things beyond what we can find in history and the climate projections and in those future projections. So we've crafted, we had 5 scenarios previously, and there are 4 now, and I'll describe why there's 4. We have one scenario that's called current trends, is really looking kind of the historical conditions with respect to hydrology, but then using the future demands that are in the urban water management plans. The scenario, and that one, so this includes, the drought periods of 1976 and 77, the 2020 and the 2021 extreme drought periods. So it includes all the droughts that were within the last 100 years of record. Our scenario 2 looks at a drought that is twice the length of that drought. So we go from a 2-year to a 4-year drought. We've created a synthetic drought in that we kind of piece together 2 different dry hydrologic conditions and use it as a stress test on the system. The third scenario is this, what we're calling beyond drought of record. It's looking at the climate projections. We have 20 individual projections. There are 10 global circulation models and 2 emission scenarios. That gives us 20 projections of the future. And those all run out through, are simulated out through the end of the century, so out through 2099. And we've looked at those projections and identified the worst droughts that we can find from those projections. Those end up, find some droughts that are 6 years and longer in those projections. And then finally, our scenario 4 is looking at abrupt disruptions. In our case, we're looking at potential for wildfire or disruption event in the watershed that might limit the ability to provide water for a short period of time. We previously had a scenario in there that was called accelerated conservation. And as Paul mentioned earlier, given the direction from the board and the conversations over the past months, to treat water conservation at the same level and equivalency as the water supply alternatives, we pulled that out of the scenarios and are now handling that in the water management alternative concept. So those are our four alternatives that we're moving forward with and have been analyzed. So just a brief summary table here showing the major assumptions associated with those scenarios. We have in scenario one, we have this historical observed hydroclimate conditions. We have water demand that's in the urban water management plan, the passive level of conservation. In each of these scenarios, though, we also have drought level conservation per the water shortage contingency plan. So as we simulate these conditions and we enter into drought periods, there are water conservation levels that are triggered further. Scenario two is really looking at a 4-year drought. This is a drought that's not been observed in the historical records. And in fact, in our climate projections, we can't find a 4-year drought that is more severe than this particular one. What we've done here is stitched together kind of the hydrologic conditions of water years 2020 and 2021. And then we follow that up with the dry conditions of 1976 and 1977. So that's really a stress test case for the system. As I mentioned, scenario three is based on the future climate projections. We have 6+ year droughts that are observed in that set of analyses. They are longer in duration, but tend to be less severe than what we see out of scenario two. And then finally, scenario four is looking at a slightly different aspect of future uncertainty. It's combining the hydrologic or hydroclimatic uncertainty with potential how high wildfire likelihood within the watershed. It could also be used as a surrogate to look at potential seismic disruptions. And we've characterized the operational assumptions with this one slightly different than the others. We look at the treatment plants operating at reduced capacity, either due to wildfire and post wildfire runoff with high sediment and carbon loads. So we look at the treatment capacity at Bontempi being offline for 6 months, and at the same time, San Geronimo water treatment plant operating at 50% capacity. So that last scenario, we're trying to combine both kind of the hydrologic uncertainty and a potential disruption within the watershed. The scenario that tends to define the kind of the amount of deficit between supply and demand moving in the future is this scenario two. And if you had grabbed the presentation off there was one correction that was made. This said scenario three. Previously, it should have said scenario two. We'll post the updated version. But scenario two, this 4-year drought, tends to define the maximum amount of deficits that we're defining. And for our consideration, we're looking at deficits here as any shortages that might occur. So inability to deliver water for the projected demands, or any storage that falls below 30,000 acre feet as total marine storage. There's roughly 80,000 acre feet of total storage in Marin's reservoirs. We've used this 30,000 acre foot as kind of an operational limit, at which point we would want to protect and manage above that level. If we look at kind of the annual amount of deficit, looking at kind of shortages and storage conditions, we're finding somewhere between 7,500 and 8,500 acre feet per year of deficit between the available supply and the projected demands in this particular scenario. All of the other scenarios have annual deficits that are smaller than this volume. We went through pretty extensive briefings on the water management alternatives, and We don't intend to do that today, but they're the categories.
Sorry, Armin, if I could just interrupt. This is Ranjit. Just going back to the previous slide. It looked to me that at the end of the 4-year period, we would be about 20,000 acre feet below the operational limit. But you're saying that the 7,500 to 8,000 acre feet deficit, if that is made up in preceding years, then the dip after 4 years of drought will not fall below the operational limits.
Right, that's correct, Director Kush. The way we've done this is the volume that falls below that 30,000. We say, what if you were to spread that out over the 4-year period? So how much additional supply could balance the reservoirs so that they do not fall below that 30,000 acre feet? And that's the annual deficit in the upper right.
Thank you.
Okay, we've looked at 7 categories of water management alternatives. I think there's over close to 40 individual alternatives within these categories. But in the general sense, we've looked at water conservation. There are 2 options there, looking at differing levels of conservation. We have the Sonoma Marin partnerships, which are looking to expand the ability to take imported water from the Russian River through Sonoma Water. There's also a regional groundwater bank that's part of that partnership category. We have local surface storage where we're looking at expanding the existing reservoirs, either augmenting the storage capacity of those reservoirs, new reservoirs, or adding operational gates to expand the storage capacity temporarily at those reservoirs. We have a category of water purchases with conveyance through Bay Interties, a very long name for the concept of importing water through purchasing water from the Sacramento Valley and moving that water into Marin system with partnerships through either the North Bay Aqueduct, Contra Costa, or East Bay Mud. We have the desalination options of looking at Marin regional desal. We have a kind of a brackish regional program with the Bay Area entities, and we have Petaluma brackish groundwater that's within that same category. And then within the recycled water, we have a number of alternatives that are looking at expansion of the purple pipe concepts of recycled water. We also have broader regional programs looking at indirect potable reuse and direct potable reuse concepts. I won't go through those on this call today, but we did very briefly, we did evaluate for today very briefly, we did evaluate all of those alternatives against a set of criteria that are shown here. How much water could they provide? What cost would it be to develop that supply? How soon could the supply be implemented? How many years essentially would it take to start generating that supply? We looked at reliability, flexibility, environmental considerations, energy work. We've done some recent work in looking at the energy estimates of all of those alternatives and are in the process of converting some of those into greenhouse gas estimates. We have quantified estimates. Then we looked at permitting, social jurisdiction, and public acceptance. Most of these were done at a qualitative scale, with the exception of the yield, cost, and the timing aspects, which were done both qualitative and quantitative. I won't ask you to read all of the lines here, but just wanted to show the process that we took all of those criteria, applied it to each one of the alternatives. In the qualitative sense, we provided ratings for each of them, 1 through 5, with 1 being kind of the best for that particular criteria, 5 being less good, and we rated them each of the alternatives across those categories to give a sense for the differences of the alternatives, the timing, the energy, the difficulty of implementation. So that's brings you kind of up to where we've been. And we're currently moving towards strategies and portfolios. So we have those 40-something individual alternatives amongst those 7 categories. And we're really looking to now build portfolios so we can evaluate them and see their performance. So we're using the terms of strategies, so a particular plan of action or policy to achieve those water management goals. And then portfolios being the method in which one of those goals can be achieved by looking at a combination of actions. And the reason we look at kind of strategies in this manner is that we realize there's very unlikely that there's a singular alternative that will achieve the goals. And there will be a balance of alternatives that can meet short-term potential deficits and those that can meet long-term. And there's also some synergies between alternatives as they move forward, and we want to identify those and pull them out. The draft portfolios that I'll share on the next slide are designed to inform the roadmap, but they are not themselves the roadmap. So just want to make sure that that's understood. We're using them essentially to inform our assessment and understand better how each of the sets of actions will perform. So given that, I'll go into the portfolios. We've crafted 4 portfolios that are for analysis. Again, they aren't recommendations. We want to test each of these out and look at how they perform in resolving those deficits that we're seeing under some of our scenarios, and then also look at the cost and the criteria associated with them. The first portfolio we have is really maximizing existing infrastructure. So it looks to emphasize alternatives that are using the existing infrastructure or building off of the regional infrastructure. It includes many of the Sonoma Marin Partnership alternatives, local storage optimization, and interconnections. The second portfolio is calling it New Local Supply. It's looking at emphasizing the alternatives which add new local drought resilient supplies. So primarily looking at desalination opportunities and reuse opportunities. So in essence, looking for alternatives that have a supply that is essentially readily available in all year types. Our portfolio C is looking at diversifying imports. So currently you have your local watershed that you depend on. You have the Russian River supplies through Sonoma Water that you get supplemental water. And this is looking at diversifying imports to yet another watershed within the portfolio. So Sacramento, looking at the Yuba Water and Sacramento Valley supplies and the purchases through either East Bay Mud or Contra Costa. And then finally, the last portfolio is one we're calling low cost. It doesn't necessarily have a particular strategy other than the cost side of it. We've simply looked at all the low cost options that were in general less than $22.50 per acre foot of new supply. And those that fall out of those is more expansive conservation, some of the Sonoma Marin conveyance improvements, regional groundwater banks, storage augmentation, and Petaluma brackish desalination. And the way we're treating these portfolios, so this is a buildup. This isn't looking trying to phase it in over time. So if you look at the first, all the projects are listed here on the first column. I realize it's fairly small. I'm trying to fit a lot on one slide, but then what we're looking at is kind of what projects could be available in the near term, kind of 0 to 3 years. What projects could be available in the midterm, what we're calling 4 to 7 years, and what projects would be available in the long term, kind of 8 to 12 years out. Any project that has a grayed out cell associated with it is found to be generally not available in that time frame due to complexity of implementing the project. That's how we kind of start with which projects could be available at which time. And then we move kind of the next step over is what are the core projects that help implement that particular strategy? Those are the ones that are shown in purple here for this particular portfolio. And then finally to the last grouping over here is where we now look at what are supporting projects. So projects that could support the core projects and are likely to offer additional benefits beyond those core projects. And we understand there's many ways to do this, but this is our approach to craft a set of portfolios that could be useful for analysis.
And Armin, if I could, in the core projects and in the supporting projects, this portfolio isn't yet selecting which of these we're looking at, right? So for example, the portfolio A there in the core projects looks at a number of different things such as resolving bottlenecks, dedicated conveyance to Nicasio, Castania to Nicasio. They're sort of options within that core project group. Is that right?
Yeah, correct, Paul. Yeah, thanks for bringing that up. Yeah, a number of these are kind of either or. You might do one or the other. What we're trying to flag here is that these are the projects that would be part of that portfolio, and there would be a process to select which is the best of those, for example, to deliver water to storage. Similarly for the reservoir enlargements, we've identified Kenton enlargement here as one of the potentials. It could be Sulahuli enlargement, or it could be a Nicasio enlargement. We're identifying kind of a local storage as a surrogate for that that set of projects.
Armin, when you say that a project is not available, are you saying that within the portfolio of maximizing existing infrastructure, these would not be options that are considered?
No, these are projects that would just not be available to be built, developed, and start providing supply within that time frame. So that's kind of irrespective of which portfolio. So these gray hold for all portfolios. So for example, here we have maximize use of Sonoma Water with the South Transmission System, which is a large conveyance effort to connect from the Cotati tanks to Castania. That would take much longer than 3 years to develop, and therefore it would not be available in that time frame. But it would be available in kind of the 4 years plus.
Okay, and even something like a movable spillway gate then falls out of the near-term option.
Yes, yeah. I mean, this is part of our goal in crafting these portfolios is really to illustrate that they're in the very near term or the immediate term, there's a limited subset of projects that you could rely upon.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, hey, Arvin, I'm super appreciative of you putting this time horizon into the analysis and having a portfolio approach. Having a short, medium, and longer term perspective will help us frame the discussion. And I think you may have seen a one-page matrix that I forwarded to you that I think might be helpful for the public to be able to see all of the potential options, costs, and return on yield. And having one of those matrices for short, medium, and long term, I think will help guide our decision making. So this is absolutely the right direction. I appreciate having the portfolio approach and look forward to seeing the next step.
Thank you, Director Smith. And I do appreciate your thinking aligns with our thinking in terms of approach. So I'll just keep us moving. I can't read all the room. So that last slide was kind of a build up just for this portfolio A. What's shown on this particular slide are the 4 scenarios, which are the projects that are are part of each of those, each of the portfolios. And you can see, so the first one is what we talked about with portfolio A is looking at the Sonoma Marin options. Has some regional groundwater bank. It has a storage enhancement option. Portfolio B, and sorry, at the top here, we have Phoenix Lake and Von Tempe Lake connections and electrification for Suluhuli to allow water to be moved out more freely. And then we have supporting projects, which are looking at continuing things like the TUCPs for kind of immediate temporary urgency change permits, which allow relaxation under the water rights, the water shortage contingency plan levels of conservations, and then the water conservation program. And we actually included here the both options of water conservation, the program and the regulatory driven program. In the next portfolio, which is new local supply, it primarily has core projects associated with Marin Regional Desal. We're looking at including both 5 and 10 MGD of regional desal. We have a Petaluma regional brackish desalination facility, and then we've built in recycled water expansion for Peacock Gap and San Quentin, as well as a DPR program. So this is likely to generate a substantial amount of new supply under this particular portfolio. The Diversify Imports portfolio is really looking at either an East Bay mud or a Contra Costa intertie and allowing water to be purchased through Sacramento Valley and transferred through their systems. And then finally, the low-cost portfolio really just does what it says. We didn't apply any other criteria other than cost to it, just looked at what falls out as our lowest cost supplies there. So we do have water conservation programs. We have some of the Sonoma Marin, the lower cost options. We have some low cost desalination. We have some low cost storage enlargement. So we wanted to share these portfolios with the board to kind of give a sense of where we're heading. At this point, we have crafted the portfolios and we're moving forward with analyzing them as a combination of projects. So all of the portfolios will be tested across all of the scenarios. So we're using the decision support model to evaluate those projects, the sequencing, and how they would be integrated into Marin system, which is actually quite complicated in terms of operational rules. When should you take more Sonoma water? How should you integrate some of the supplies? We'll also be evaluating them for performance measures. So how well do they achieve our storage level targets and our shortage reductions? And then the evaluation criteria, we'll be using those criteria to come up with cost, environmental, and social aspects associated with each portfolio. So we hope to use the results from that analysis to identify kind of pros and cons of the various portfolios, look at the ability for them to resolve short and long-term deficits, and then also look at what high-performing common elements of those portfolios of each of them are. And then we'll use the results and discussions around those portfolios to be used to inform the development of a recommended roadmap.
So Armin, my understanding is that, right, we're trying to draw a distinction of portfolios and what the ultimate roadmap may look like. And the portfolio process is really a tool for us to gain further information to then inform the roadmap. But the roadmap isn't necessarily and likely won't be selecting one of the portfolios. Is that right? Can you kind of build on that if you can?
Yeah, that's correct, Ben. We're using the portfolios kind of to test out, and what we envision the roadmap is a combination, kind of the high performing aspects of various portfolios would make their way into a recommended roadmap. So yeah, like as I led the conversation there, the portfolios themselves are not the roadmap. They're a way to help us get towards the roadmap. Thanks for that reminder. Okay, I know we've run long on time, but where we're heading is where we're presenting these draft strategies and portfolios. We have a draft assessment report that is going to Paul and team this week, which covers all of the analysis that's been done to date, with the exception of the portfolios and roadmap. We'll be analyzing the portfolio. Sorry about the typo there. Shouldn't be portfolios. Should just be portfolios. And then we'll be coming back to present to the board within the January timeframe on the results of that analysis and start developing the roadmap for a presentation for the board. We'll have a final assessment report, which will add 2 sections to our draft report, which is the analysis portfolios and the recommendations. Then we'll be buttoning that up in the January-February timeframe for staff and board and public review. That concludes the summary that I was intending to provide. Paul, I don't know if you wanted to add anything to close.
That's a good place for us to stop, and any questions, I think, at this point.
Yeah, guys, this is a non-action item, so it's for information only. We'll be making no motions or anything like that, but feel free to ask questions and we'll go to the public and hear their comments.
This has been a really, again, another really helpful and really important step in this process, which we started nearing 9 months or 10 months ago. I can't remember exactly when we kicked this off, but it's been the level of analysis and the types of analyses that we've been really needing to get toward, where we start seeing the different actions in light of combining them under different strategies. So thank you folks for pulling this together. I know there's a lot of work that's gone into this. I think that one thing is just this is the first time we've seen this. So just for the public's benefit, we haven't seen this information before, and I do think it would be really helpful if we make this available so that people can see this. I know it's draft and it's not complete, but it is really important information, I think, for us to start sharing. I want to really encourage us to be mindful of time. Time is not really our friend. It hasn't been for probably for years, to be honest. But with our financial planning that we need to do for our next budget, our cost of service analysis and other things, some of this information I think is going to be important for us in terms of how we plan ahead, so that maybe there are some things that we want to, if we do want to try to begin moving forward on some action, the sooner we have that information, the sooner we can actually factor that into our financial plan for the next couple of years. And I want to, I think something that the board has not really chewed on is what is our process for looking at these portfolios and the creation of a roadmap or some other guiding document going forward. I feel like there's going to be a lot of information that's going to come out quite quickly, and a lot of it that needs to be looked at, and I feel like we're going to need some time to review it, because it's really important to understand it so that we do make sound decisions. And I also want to make sure that we're leaving enough time for us to engage our communities and the people who are stakeholders and have a very strong interest in being able to ask questions about the report, and for us to dive into, I think, some of these things that are going to come out, so that we really not only make a wise decision based on this information, but we also take the time to educate the public with it, as well as ourselves. And I don't think we've given some thought to exactly how that process should look, but I think it's something that we need to consider. We might consider, something that might make sense is creating, maybe even a quick series of workshops that might, facilitate some organized discussion and some and maybe quick and timely discussions around the water supply yields and costs, phasing and feasibility. These are things that, while I love that summary table, and I think we're going to need to be able to go back to something like that as a way to stay organized. At the same time, we're going to need to have time to dive into the details about feasibility and phasing and costs so that we do understand them correctly, because they're, again, far too important to not take the time to get it right. I'll stop there.
Okay, any other comments?
Yeah, maybe just President Russell, just one more technical question. Armin, under projects, water conservation program seems like a big bucket. Are you going to be delineating different elements of water conservation, water efficiency within that as you expand the portfolio analysis?
Yeah, thanks, Director Kush. Carrie Pollard is currently, sorry, let me just back up a little bit. Within the conservation program, there are a number of elements of what makes up that conservation program. So there's maybe half a dozen or more individual elements that make up that program. We don't have that documented yet, so we're in the process of documenting what makes up that individual program. And then we had a second option, which was a little bit more of a regulatory focused conservation program, which it went even further on the conservation, and that will be documented. What are the elements that make up that particular program? We've kind of lumped them into two groups, two broader sets of options. I don't know, Paul, if you want to expand on that. Or
Yeah, no, I think you hit it, Armin. It's really, we're treating conservation as two separate projects. One is incentive-based and has a number of programs associated with it. And that's what Peter Mayer and Medallas Water Management reviewed for us. And then the second conservation level, which is a regulatory program, which would have more enforcement and costs associated with personnel for that enforcement.
Does AMI fall into either of those two conservation packages?
Yes, is the short answer. Yes, absolutely.
Great. Well, I'm glad conservation's right up there with the top in terms of our view of our water supply and augmentation options. So that's great. But it does come back to short, medium, and long term as far as I'm concerned. And I've rarely seen a plan presented without very clear goals. And I'd imagine, Arvin, it's hard for you to not have goals also, right? If you don't know you're shooting for 10,000 acre feet or 30,000 acre feet or 2,000 acre feet, well, then it's going to be hard to pick something. So I would suggest that we have some clear goals, and that's going to be difficult. But in the short term, maybe it's 2,000 acre feet, or let's pick the number. Let's be thoughtful about it. When we have emergencies, then we have to come up with an answer. In the medium term, it's going to be a different set of opportunities. In the long term, it's going to be a different set of opportunities. And the grand jury report and all its flaws and all its ideas and all its opportunities, it was a very clear set of goals for, I think it was 10 to 15,000 acre feet. That may or may not be right, but we do need to pick goals and we do need to assign them to short, medium, and long term. And our job will be much easier once we are able to do that.
yeah, thanks, Director Smith. I agree with that. I think that's the direction we're heading with the roadmap as well. So I think right now we're in the process of making sure we test out and understand how each of the portfolios actually perform, and then we have determined what the range of the deficit could be. So that sets kind of the bounds of where our goals should be. In the near term, I think we'll be very challenged, or the district will be very challenged in how much of that goal can actually be achieved just due to the timing aspect, which we've tried to articulate. So,
Armin, I'm sorry, it's hard to stop. I know it's getting late, but some of these may be, the technical feasibility of some of the projects, I think is maybe less understood than it is for others. For example, the brackish water desalinization option in Petaluma. As you're doing your portfolio analysis, will you be including some metric or weighting, with respect to our current knowledge on whether the option is highly feasible, or still needs further investigation?
Yeah, great question. Yeah, so one of the evaluation criteria that we flashed up very briefly was a technical feasibility criteria. And yeah, you're exactly right with the Petaluma brackish, where there's a lot of uncertainty. We call it a conceptual level at this point because a lot of the evaluation has not been done. So as we build portfolios around that, we'll identify aspects of the portfolio that have quite a bit of uncertainty on the feasibility, also with respect to reliability. So each of the projects has been flagged with their technical feasibility rating, but then we'll extract that out of the portfolios. So when you look at multiple projects together, the portfolio may actually be more robust if it includes some highly feasible, very implementable projects combined with some that are a little bit more conceptual that require planning level investigations before you could actually make a decision on what the project is.
Great. Good. Thank you.
And
Okay.
Armin, if I could just ask a quick, sorry, President Russell, do you mind if I ask just one quick question?
Sure, absolutely.
Go ahead. Armin, once we start seeing the testing of these scenarios come out, would it be possible to actually break down the actual water production by item within there, or are you going to look to group it into the portfolio as an aggregate?
We've already done some initial assessment of what each of the alternatives can produce from a yield standpoint. So we have that already, and now we're looking at kind of the combination of, we know that most of these individual actions won't produce the volume required to meet the objective. So I guess the answer is yes, we'll have both the individual and the portfolio combined response.
Great, thank you.
Okay. Let's go to the public.
Thank you. We have 5 speakers, or 6 and counting. So the first 3, Phil Sauter, Clayton Smith, and Carol D. Mr. Phil Sauter, please.
Thank you. As I mentioned in the beginning, the Water District's mission is to provide drinking water. And in fact, 40% of our drinking water is going into the ground. That's how much our residential water users use outdoors. As Director Cush said, conservation could send us into a drought in much better shape than if we weren't conserving. As he also said, conservation is a big bucket. We're currently spending $3 million a year on conservation, and I'm not sure what we're getting out of it. The last forecast I heard is we could save 4,000 acre feet by 2040. But I think we need it in 2025, and that's what we asked Madaus to come back with, not 2040. By 2040, we'll have spent $50 million at $3 million a year, which we're spending on conservation. To me, it just doesn't make sense to use high quality water on landscaping, which will shut off abruptly when there's a drought. I'm going to suggest that there should be a separate supply and distribution system for outdoor use. We currently don't know. I've asked for this info. We don't know how many tier 4 users there are and how much water they use. I saw a map once that said they're relatively few in number and they're relatively concentrated geographically. Unlike potable water users, they don't care where it comes from. And from what I've heard, they don't care how much it costs. We could vastly expand our recycled water program. They could use desal water. We could introduce a system of purple pipes in a small geographic area. We could run tanker trucks, and we could use pristine water when it's available, but not make it mandatory that outdoor water come from the same supply that we get our drinking water. I really would like to look at this and try to figure out how quickly we could reduce that significant amount of outdoor water usage and thereby preserve the quality and the quantity and the reliability of our potable water. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Clayton Smith, please.
Oh, good. I already pressed the button. The future town hall you're talking about, I have a thought of caution. This use of overly specialized terminology, I fear, leads to opacity in dialogue. Public review needs a language that the public is familiar with to present these ideas. Otherwise, I think it will be seen as just another smokescreen we've had to deal with in almost all other areas of public policy. And in that regard, I think it also creates a power relationship that puts the public in a low point, a deficient point in understanding, and leads to, I think, a kind of alienation from the process that should be avoided. It has been a problem all along because we've had almost no in-person meetings so that those of us from the public could actually have dialogue with you. It's been a very strange conversation. If you move to more of a or increasingly manufactured versus natural water, one of the big questions going to come up is what assistance do you anticipate for homeowner filtration systems to mitigate the public's perception of a loss in the quality of the water that's going to be provided to their houses. And I'm sure most people are going to feel who have lived, are long-term residents like myself, who came here and love the water, are going to feel real bad about this manufactured water, and you're going to have to deal with that. The ends versus means, choosing means to achieve ends, which is about the goals you're looking at. The goals are part, though, of an uncertain natural future. And I think that needs to be dealt with. And I think that needs to be dealt with by bringing in some people from outside this circle of conversation who actually are people who have spent careers investigating the natural phenomena of water supply, including Gerald Pollack, who's the editor of the journal Water. You've got Lynn Ingram over at Berkeley, paleoclimatologist. You've got Don Easterbrook up at Eastern Washington University. And you've got this remarkable solar scientist, Valentina Zarkova over at Bournemouth in England. We need more information.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Ms. Carol D., please.
Thank you for this opportunity to speak. First off, I'd like to welcome the new directors to this very important process. As a member of the West Marin agricultural community of Hicks Valley, I would like to state our grave concerns about and vigorous objection to the item in the water supply portfolio, which involves augmenting local supply by increasing the dam height on the Sulihule Reservoir by approximately 30 feet. Topographical maps produced by Jacobs Engineering at the July 22nd meeting of the board show that this scale of augmentation would result in inundation, which would seriously impact 7 family ranches located in Hicks Valley. It would destroy sole access roads. It would destroy acres of lowland fertile pastures, vital infrastructure for ongoing agricultural work, and our family homes. This proposal would create the loss of multi-generational family businesses, the loss of multi-generational homes, and a loss of opportunity for future generations to prosper should the inundation eliminate our businesses, our homes, our infrastructure. We have been advocating for the removal of this particular proposal from the overall portfolio since it first came to our attention in July. We urge the board to look for ways to more effectively and practically use the Sula Hula Reservoir's current capacity to support the overall goal of water resiliency in Marin. Thank you.
Thank you. The next three speakers are Roger Roberts, Larry Minikes, and Ed Jamison. Go ahead, Mr. Roberts.
Yes, this has been an interesting evening. And I think what I hear Jacob saying is that they're going to do a project by project feasibility evaluation and weight, if you will, its reliability with some sort of an index to help us understand which of the projects make the most sense from a purely feasible point of view. Am I correct? If that is the way we're heading, that's a good thing, because up until now, we have not had any information that led us to believe one project is more reliable and more feasible than another. Is that true? Am I understanding Jacob's objectives now at this point?
Armin, you want to take that?
Yeah, I can jump in. Yeah. So the work that's been done to date, we had feasibility and reliability assessed on each of the individual projects at a qualitative scale. So we've not done quantitative assessments of their feasibility and reliability, but we've done qualitative assessments. What we're intending to do now is to use that combination of projects to look at how the portfolio might perform with respect to feasibility and reliability. And we're not intending to revisit the individual projects unless there's conversation that needs to occur and updates to those rating criteria.
Well, I would say, and there were some earlier board comments on this too, in terms of the decision-making in the roadmap. And I do think we will work on designing a process that captures the needs and interests of the board. And the public in terms of the actual looking at roadmaps, alternatives, and decision-making. And in that process, we'll be talking in detail about pros and cons of those projects and risks and uncertainties and feasibilities, along with the givens, which, kind of our costs and yields from the modeling. So I think we're going to get there. And we are all hearing the team, the questions that are coming up, and a lot of them really are getting to, I think, the process of decision-making. So I just want to say that we're hearing it and we've been thinking about it, and we will be bringing some thoughts back to the board, because that really is, we're still in the, analytical work at this point, but that's kind of a different shift, a bit of a pivot, and we'll be working with the board on that process and substance in the coming weeks.
Mr. Larry Minikes, please, and Ed Jamison.
Yes, good evening. And I would like to second Director Schmidt's earlier comments and thank Armin and your staff for the work. What you're showing today really encapsulates months and months of presentations, work on that you've been doing, that we've been receiving from you. And with slides 17 and 18, portfolio details, I know sound effects aren't a big thing, but there can almost be a drum roll here. Because this really is the unrolling, the next sort of phase, if you will, of where we're going. Because now we're starting to, even though this is a draft, we're starting to narrow things down. It all makes sense from everything we've done. You look at these charts and you nod your head and you go, yep, this all makes logical sense. And that's what I wanted to add to this conversation tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Ed Jamison, please.
Yes, thanks. I've been consistently complimentary and encouraging in Jacob's many presentations, but there are inadequacies, most of which I've several times highlighted, that need to be addressed. First, I believe your estimate that we only need about 8,000 acre feet of drought supply to maintain a 30,000 acre foot minimum appears to be entirely inadequate. Based on straightforward, simple modeling, I believe that we need at least 15,000 acre feet of new supply. And if your modeling assumes we would turn on new supply after only one dry winter, I'd question that. We have a dry winter every 6 or 7 years, like clockwork, and doing that would regularly waste about 14 million or more of unneeded additional supply. Waiting until near the end of a second dry winter would require more supply, but I believe the extra capacity would be financially justified if it were desal. We need to see the assumptions behind your black box outputs defining required supply. Forecasting the size of our need is very straightforward, and as I suggested to you back in October, I believe future presentations should include a simple slide showing each of 4 years of assumed supply from rainfall, Sonoma, and new sources, and usage for potable production, stream releases, and evaporation. A second issue that we still have not been told whether desal must be operated at full capacity or whether it can be dialed back to something like 15% of capacity, or perhaps even less. And we've still not been told how much it costs to take desal offline and later reactivate it, and the annual cost to store it ready for use. This information is absolutely critical for planning our supply needs. The world's second largest engineering consulting company should have the answers to these questions on the shelf, and we need to have them. And last, your desal cost estimates for a small 5 MGD plant have gone from absurd at 357 million to 302 million to what I believe is still grossly excessive at about 260 million. Doheny, which has costs for slant well intakes and full salinity ocean water, is proceeding at an estimated cost of 140 million for 5 MGD. A 20% larger Antioch plant is being built for 110 million. And Kennedy Jenks estimated just over a year ago that we could build a 5 MGD plant for about 125 million, excluding a 30% contingency. Your roughly 260 million estimate is about twice what these comparables suggest. Desal is our only alternative for significant drought-resistant new supply. It must not be disqualified by unrealistically high cost estimates. And earlier in the process, it was estimated that desal might be brought online in 4 to 6 years. Thank you.
Thank you. The next three speakers are Silky Valentine, David Behar, and Marilyn Price. Valentine, please. Silky Valentine.
Hello. Good evening. I'm on the steering committee of 350 Marin, a local climate action group. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. As a mother and grandmother, and I'm very concerned about the future and survival of the next generations and all life on Earth as we love and know it. I like to express strong support for water conservation. Reducing and reusing human water consumption is essential to become responsible stewards of our planet's water resources. The climate emergency made us more aware of how precious water is and that we can't use drinking and fresh water like there's no tomorrow. Please consider that we are only one species on Earth respectfully. Water is life for all life on Earth. Unfortunately, we are in the 6th mass extinction due to human behavior. We can't overuse our planet's resources. Please make water conservation key to tackle the water crisis. Thank you for all your work.
Thank you. Mr. David Behar, then Marilyn Price, please.
Good evening. I want to just urge the board to take time to evaluate the depth of all of this information, the complexity of the choices that have to be made, and the duration of those choices. We're thinking on a climate change timescale now, that's decadal, 50 years plus or minus, maybe longer. And this stuff is very complicated. I can think of questions that might arise, and some of them already are, regarding the resilience standards, the supply options themselves, the cost of those options, and of course the phasing of those options. And I know that everyone wants to get to an answer now, and maybe even get to an answer during the finance conversations that are being had related to rates, but I would urge that time be taken to dive deep for the board and the public together, and to work with staff also to dive deep in those conversations with board and public. I get the sense from attending the last few meetings that maybe the conservation conversations that have been had in the last few meetings, including at the water supply meetings, has maybe had some impact. That's valuable to know, and I think was a good move on the part of the consultant team. So I just think take time. I like Director Schmidt's thought about workshops. I could see those being really valuable. Maybe you could even have a give and take that is a little bit different than PowerPoint presentation, 3-minute comment, back to a PowerPoint presentation, and maybe have a little bit of a more informal give and take. I mean, I keep on calling myself an old timer, but in meetings when we were in person, it was, you know, a lot like that. And a little less formal, and I think a little less formalistic might benefit all parties. So I guess my main message is take some time, and if you need to push some of the long-term cost elements out beyond the current rate process, that's okay. That's the way things often work. Thanks.
Thank you. Miss Marilyn Price, please.
Yes, hi, I want to welcome the new board and to compliment you all on all the work you're doing. That your charts just kind of like blow my mind. I have to take my magnifying glass and see what that finer print is saying, but thank you for that. But I just want to give a plug, echo what some of the others have said in terms of conservation, and thank you so much for bringing conservation up into this decision. And I don't look at all the technical stuff. I look at the longer term. I read daily, you know, what the scientists are saying, and it is truly frightening what can happen in the next some odd years, you know, even in 8 years. And now is the time, and I think we need to educate all of our residents that we need to live within our limits now. We need to change how we're living so that we can have very significant conservation measures adopted that people are doing, and that we get used to that kind of lifestyle. Hopefully, as time goes on, we can get to another point where these problems are solved. But right now, everything that I read, we are truly running out of time. And people like me that read it, you know, but most people don't, or if they do, they're just, you know, not attending. And if you've got children, grandchildren, or whoever else is going to come in the future, I think that's who we need to think about while we make these decisions. So that's my spiel on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Price. Next 3 speakers, 8800, Al Grimet, and Wendy. Go ahead, 8800.
Hi, Nancy Okada again. Yeah, thank you for the presentation. I think that you really need to consider how willing the public is to participate in conservation, and how much they've shown you how willing they are to participate in conservation over the past couple of years. You had your recycled water facility open. They came and they got water from it. I don't know, how could that be reopened? They, in the past, people have purchased rain barrels and other rain catching devices. There was even an incentive program in San Francisco where you could get a discount on that. That's another way we could have captured a lot of water in this last rainstorm, and given the atmospheric floods that are going to be happening, that's an even greater chance. And finally, I don't know if you're aware of what the municipalities are doing. In San Anselmo, in their revitalizing the Memorial Park. They are planning on installing a huge underground tank to capture the rainwater, to capture the water, and even possibly talking to Las Colinas about getting recycled water from them to meet the town's needs. And other municipalities may be doing the same thing. The thing is that you need to work with all these municipalities and not just go ahead and build facility after facility after facility, because the water is getting much more expensive, and we are letting a lot of water just come from the sky and just disappear down our storm drains, especially off of synthetic turf fields. And we need to capture that water, and the public can help do that. So that needs to be really encouraged. We really do need to live within our environmental footprint. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Grumet, please.
Yes, first I just want to thank Armin and his team for the excellent work in creating a rational framework within which to seek to optimize the water portfolio of solutions. I have a request and a question. The request would be that environmental factors not be considered qualitative factors, but instead that we start looking at them as quantitative factors and factoring them in to the the cost and return profile of each project or portfolio. So that's the request. The question is, when we are comparing conservation solution that would involve, for example, investment in a recycling system or something similar, where there's an outlay of cash, but then a potentially permanent reduction in demand. What methodology are we using to compare that type of investment to one where there's a facility that requires ongoing maintenance and has ongoing costs associated that would be significantly in excess of what a homeowner might need to do to maintain a rain barrel or a gray water system. So just a question about the methodology we're using for these what amount to flows of cash and water supply that are not just static, but they're occurring over time with varying amounts at different points in time. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Next speaker, Wendy, please.
Yes, hi, Wendy Callens with Sustainable Marin. I do want to echo what a number of the speakers have been saying. I really appreciate the really thorough analysis that has been done. I want to especially put some emphasis on not just conservation, but reuse of water, because I think that could be the best of savings of making a better use of the supply that we already have. And when I look at the projects, even a teeny tiny type that it is, I'm not seeing really the specifics of what kind of reuse systems we're really looking at. And I want to point to the letter from Paul Mann and the various types of measures that other municipalities have used to get people to develop reuse systems individually in their homes. And while each one may seem like a drop in the bucket, pun intended, I think the aggregate of what can be saved if we really come up with a culture of reusing our water as much as possible might be the best scenario that we can come up with. And so I really want to emphasize that I would like to see more information and detail of how that can happen, and also say that our organization, which includes some of the speakers like Sustainable Mill Valley, Sustainable San Rafael, Green Change, Green Tours, Resilient Neighborhoods, we really have our finger on the pulse of the grassroots and the ability to reach individual homeowners. So I want to come in not just as an advocate, but as a partner that can help to disseminate some of the information and use encouragement techniques and incentives to get more people to develop these systems in their own homes. Thank you.
Thank you. And we have Miss Susan Hop, please.
Yes, I want to also thank everyone for the hard work that's reflected in this report, and also welcome our new board members. And what strikes me in this is the water conservation is a very big bucket. And I would really like to see it broken out. And I guess echoing what others have mentioned, you know, all the opportunities, whether, you know, the reuse, the rain catchment, purple pipes, you know, I think it would have the benefit of really educating the public and really getting into our collective consciousness, or, you know, collective unconscious as well. So, and I want to mention, I was actually very involved in the 2008, the 2010, I guess I would call it a fight regarding the desal proposal. And, you know, what really, you know, it all sounds good, desal, but once you look under the covers, you just see all of the issues, and people really came together to fight that. And we did pass an ordinance that would require a vote by the public. And whether it had to do with health of the water, whether it had to do with health of the bay, the ecosystem, it's not just humans, and ultimately the financials. And it was really a report that was commissioned by Food and Water Watch that really pointed out the marginal costs, the difference of putting, you know, investment in conservation was really the financial win. So, and the desal was just really, was nuts. So again, I just ask, please break out the multiple opportunities, the components around water conservation. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Hop. There are no further speakers.
President Russell, I think you're on mute.
I think you're right. What I was about to say is that for the new members, it's almost 10 o'clock. Get used to this. This is a typical board meeting. And please budget time appropriately. And with that, let's go on to item 8.
Good evening, directors. Just want to remind you that this coming week, we still have 2 committee meetings. On Thursday is the Watershed Committee at 1:30. And on Friday, we'll have the Operations Committee. Both are virtual. Also, next week, we'll have our committee meeting of the Finance and Administration, and that will be our last board committee meeting of the year. And that's at 9:30 in the morning. Then we'll come back and have our regular Board of Directors meeting on January 3rd, 2023. And then also please keep in mind, I need to know by this Thursday, the board retreat dates that I provided you, which is sometime late January, early February. So please get to me as soon as you get your information and schedule, you know, checked out with people that you need to speak with before the 15th, and let me know. And in terms of external meetings, we'll have the North Bay Watershed Association meeting Friday, January 6th.
Thank you very much, Terry. No, I don't think there are any questions. I strongly encourage the new board members in particular to attend these meetings if it's at all possible. If you can't attend, at least review the committee meetings so you're familiar with what the committees do. The committees are a key part of the operations, because they allow detailed discussion of items that are really, in a sense, too long to get into. You can see how long these board meetings go. You add 3 or 4 more of these, and we're here till 3 in the morning. So, you know, that's the thing to keep in mind. These committees are quite important, and they encourage the public input to where we're going. Okay, with that, thank you all. and we're going to adjourn.
Thank you.
Have a good night, folks.